There wasn't a single seat left at the table. They had balloons, custom cupcakes, and champagne flutes lined in pink. I stood quietly in the corner, holding the diaper cake I was told to bring, the one I paid for. My sister giggled, glowing under fairy lights. My mom clinked a glass. And then it happened. She raised her drink and said with a grin, "To our princess and her new home." Everyone clapped. I didn't, because that new home? It was my apartment, the one I'd renovated, furnished, lived in. My dad stood up and pulled out a glossy folder like this was a magic trick.
A deed. Signed.
Stamped. Transferred. My hands went cold. My throat dried. I looked around the room. No one looked confused. Just me. No one said, "Wait, isn't that hers?" They smiled like nothing was wrong. Like it wasn't betrayal, just another announcement. My sister beamed. "I can't believe you guys did this for me." And my mom winked. "Your sister's been doing well. She can afford to share." Share? I opened my mouth, then closed it. There are moments when rage burns too hot to scream. When humiliation is so deep, it wraps around your spine and squeezes. So I smiled, set the diaper cake on the table, and left. I didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene, but I did start counting. Not minutes, not hours, appliances. Because if they thought they could gift wrap my life and call it love, they forgot who wired the walls, who bolted in the shelves, who installed every ceiling fan. By 6 a.m. the next morning, everything was gone.
Fridge.
Oven. Faucets. Handles. Even the damn light switch covers. At 6:41 a.m., my sister texted me. "Is this a joke?" I replied, "Not yet." They thought I'd disappear quietly, but I was just getting started. Because they didn't just steal an apartment. They stole from a woman who builds her own kingdom and doesn't need permission to tear it down. And by the time I'm done, they'll wish they'd never uncorked that champagne. The locksmith arrived at 7:15 a.m. By 7:30, the front door had a new handle, coded, sealed, and owned by me again. Inside, the place looked like a stripped skeleton. I took the couch, the bar stools, even the toilet paper holder from the guest bath. Because I bought it all. Every hinge, every faucet, every shelf, installed by me, paid by me. They didn't inherit a home. They inherited a floor plan. By 9 a.m., my phone lit up like wildfire. First my dad. "This is extreme. Be reasonable." Then my mom. "We didn't think you'd mind. It's family." Then my sister. "You're ruining my baby shower week." I didn't answer. They didn't deserve answers. They deserved consequences. Because while they were playing house with my life, I was quietly building something far more powerful than rooms and walls. Documentation. Bank statements. Receipts. Rental history in my name. Transfer of ownership forged under pressure and lies. All conveniently time-stamped. And tucked neatly into a digital folder labeled Emergency Fire. At noon, my parents showed up at the apartment. Or what was left of it. My mom gasped when she stepped inside. "Where is everything?" she shrieked. I tilted my head. "You mean my things?" My dad's tone hardened. "We can fix this if you calm down." That's when I finally laughed. Calm? I was ice. Glacier calm. And glaciers move slowly, but when they do, they crush everything in their path. "You forged a gift," I said. "Now you're getting the return policy." They followed me outside, still talking, bargaining. But I was already in the truck, halfway down the street before their words caught up to me. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a transfer of power. And I was just beginning to turn off the lights, one switch at a time. Because the difference between giving something and stealing it is that when you steal from a builder, you forget they know exactly how to dismantle it. By Monday, I was already 3 steps ahead. I filed a formal dispute on the deed transfer. Forged signature. False statements. My lawyer friend, Jordan, took one look and said, "They're not just unethical, they're sloppy." Sloppy enough to put the wrong middle initial on the documents. Sloppy enough to backdate without realizing I had GPS receipts proving I was out of state the entire day they claimed. I signed it. By Tuesday, a temporary injunction froze the deed. The apartment was now officially in limbo. Just like their lies. That night, I posted a polite, simple message in the family group chat. If you're living in the apartment after Thursday, you'll be trespassing. My sister replied instantly. You're blowing this out of proportion. I'm pregnant. I stared at her message, emotionless. Funny how suddenly her pregnancy became a shield. It wasn't a concern when she accepted stolen property with fake smiles and fake gratitude. It wasn't a concern when she laughed under those string lights, drinking sparkling cider in my kitchen. At midnight, I sent one more text, this time just to her. You know that security camera you never noticed above the hallway mirror? Typing.
Stopped.
Typing.
Stopped again.
Because now she was realizing. The woman they used to call overly serious and too quiet had been documenting everything. Every visit. Every conversation. Even a moment my dad handed over the deed and said, she won't fight back. She owes us. The camera caught it.
Clear as glass. And now?
So did the court. Wednesday morning, my parents called. Not to apologize.
To beg. Please.
This will ruin us, my mother whispered. We could lose the church board seat. The neighborhood committee.
Ah.
So that's what mattered. Not the betrayal. Not the theft. Just the reputation. I hung up. No reply. No mercy. Because I wasn't coming for revenge. I was coming for truth. And when truth walks in wearing silence, it doesn't scream. It just points and watches everything collapse around the guilty. On Thursday morning, movers arrived. Not for me, for them. 3 uniformed workers stepped inside the apartment at 9 a.m. with a court-approved eviction notice in hand. My sister cried. My mom cursed. My dad paced like he still had options. He didn't. Every lie they told was now dust. Every smug grin from that baby shower dissolved into panic. My sister screamed, "You can't do this. I'm pregnant." I looked her dead in the eye. You weren't pregnant when you signed my name without consent. They didn't even deny it anymore. Just begged. I stood still in the hallway, arms crossed, watching the workers tape up boxes, clothes, trinkets, a half-built crib. My dad tried to whisper something, maybe plead. I held up a hand. Don't. He paused. We raised you. I nodded. Exactly. You raised me. You taught me how to be quiet when hurt, how to disappear when dismissed. I leaned closer. You just never thought I'd learn how to use that silence. They were given 90 minutes to vacate. I stood outside while the neighbors peeked through blinds, curiosity in their eyes. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a reckoning. At 10:57 a.m., my sister walked past me carrying a diaper bag and nothing else. Her voice cracked. I hope you're happy. I didn't answer. Because it was never about being happy. It was about finally being heard without having to raise my voice. By 11 a.m., the locks were changed again. Not by me. By court order. I stood in the doorway, staring at the shell of a home I once built with dreams, not knowing the people I loved would rob me blind. But this time, there was no shame. Just clarity. They took my home. So I took their illusion. And when the world saw them for what they really were, not victims, not a happy family, just thieves in matching holiday sweaters, that's when I knew. They were never losing a home. They were just finally losing access to me. That line kept echoing. I hope you're happy. Like happiness was ever the point. Like they hadn't stood in a room full of cake and cameras, celebrating the theft of my life like it was confetti-worthy. But since they wanted to talk about hope, I hoped the motel pillows were flat. I hoped the mini fridge rattled all night. And I hoped every time my sister opened an empty kitchen drawer, she remembered exactly who used to stock it with groceries she never paid for. By Friday, the group chat was quiet. No baby updates. No mom's good morning memes. Just silence. Then Saturday morning a knock. I watched from the peephole. My mom stood there, holding a grocery bag. Something told me it wasn't food. I opened the door halfway. She didn't meet my eyes. I just want to talk, she said softly. Not about the apartment. About you. She sat on the edge of the couch, fingers tracing the fabric like it might forgive her. She said she missed me, that things got out of hand, that my sister didn't know better, that it was my father's idea, that she just went along. I'm not asking to move back in, she whispered. I'm asking for a second chance. I sat across from her. You know what second chances require? I said calmly, the first one being respected. She flinched. I stood up. Let me show you something. I walked her to the utility closet and opened the door. Inside, every receipt, every document, every piece of paper tied to the apartment.
Organized. Scanned.
Sealed. This is how much trust costs, I said. And I paid in full. You tried to bankrupt it. Her eyes welled. But I didn't feel sympathy. Only release. She left without finishing the tea she didn't deserve. And I sat there for a long time afterward, letting the silence fill every inch of me. Because for once, I wasn't the one left standing empty. I was whole. And they were the ones knocking on locked doors, asking for a version of me that no longer existed. By Monday, the whispers started. From church friends. From cousins who only called when someone died. From fake aunts with too much perfume and no loyalty. They didn't know the whole story, but they heard enough to pick sides. She's tearing the family apart. All over an apartment? Her sister's pregnant, for God's sake. I didn't respond, because I'd lived my whole life under that roof of guilt, where obedience was love and silence was survival. But not anymore. Instead, I printed every document, every timeline, made a file labeled for anyone who thinks I'm the villain. I sent it to the family group chat. No caption, no drama, just truth, receipts of payments, emails showing forged consent, screenshots of my sister bragging to her friend. We're finally getting her place, she'll understand. She didn't mean for me to see that one, but she sent it to the wrong thread. And once the truth was out, the silence became theirs, not mine. By Wednesday, I got a message from Uncle Dave. I'm sorry. I didn't know. If you ever need anything, you let me know. Funny how quickly people apologize when the story's no longer edited by manipulators in matching church outfits. That night, I went to the apartment, sat on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes and clean air. I decided not to keep it. Too much history soaked into the walls. But before I let it go, I walked through each room, one last time. Not mourning.
Documenting.
Because I wanted to remember what it looked like to reclaim something stolen without screaming. What it meant to walk through fire without burning down who I am. They said I overreacted. That I was cold. But they forgot. I was always the quiet one. The fixer. The builder.
The backbone.
Until I stopped letting broken people lean on me like I owed them a place to collapse. And when I finally stood on my own, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the rent on their comfort. Thursday, 6:41 p.m. My sister texted again. Be honest. Did you hire someone to take the washer and dryer? I stared at my phone and smiled.
She still didn't get it.
I didn't hire anyone. I just reclaimed what I bought. No warning. No guilt. No second guess. That night, I scheduled one last delivery. Not to the apartment. To their new address. The one they were now crashing in temporarily, according to a cousin who couldn't keep secrets. Friday, 8 a.m. A truck pulled into the motel parking lot. Two men in uniforms rolled out a massive box wrapped in black plastic. No return label. No sender. Inside, a full-sized mirror. And, taped to it, a copy of the baby shower group photo. Everyone smiling. Me, off to the side, holding the diaper cake. At the bottom of the mirror, I'd written 6 words in silver marker. Look who stole the wrong woman. My sister called me within minutes. But I didn't pick up. I let her voice go to voicemail, rambling, angry, crying. Then she texted. Are you seriously doing all this because of a deed? And that's when I knew. She still thought this was about property. She still didn't understand this was about identity. Because when you're always the one who gives, They forget you were never built to be stepped on. They forget that you kept the lights on when no one thanked you, that you kept quiet for peace, not weakness. But peace has an expiration date, and mine had been up since the moment they toasted new beginnings, with champagne poured over my name. So, I did the one thing they never expected. I walked away. Not with a bang, but with every single piece of power I'd ever handed them, quietly pulled back into my own two hands. And as I watched their drama explode through the family like wildfire, I didn't say a word, because silence, when earned, isn't empty. It's loaded.
Calm.
And devastating.
Just like me.
It sold in 2 days. Full asking price. No negotiations. Clean title. Cash offer. The new owner walked through on a sunny afternoon, smiled at the open space, and said, "Feels like peace." I nodded, because that's what I was selling. Not walls. Not countertops.
Peace.
I didn't need the apartment anymore. I needed closure. So I let it go. And with the money, I bought something smaller. Simpler. Quiet. No shared walls. No shadows of betrayal in the floorboards. Just sunlight, bookshelves, and locks with only my fingerprints. Weeks passed. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. Not the kind where your mind runs laps trying to rewrite conversations that already broke you. One afternoon, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a crumpled baby shower photo. My sister had circled me in red ink. Below it, 2 words. "You won." I laughed, because she still didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. This was about ending the cycle. For once in my life, I chose me. I chose boundaries that didn't come with guilt trips. I chose dignity over fake forgiveness. And I chose silence, not as a weapon, but as a door they no longer get to walk through. I didn't attend the baby's birth. I sent a single gift, a hardcover children's book. The little engine that said no. Inside I wrote, "May she grow up knowing that saying no isn't cruel. It's power. And no one has the right to take her voice away." No signature. Just a quiet echo of everything I'd fought to reclaim. A week later, I walked past my old building one last time. The curtains were new. The door freshly painted. A stranger's life beginning where mine had ended. And I smiled. Not because it was easy, but because I had finally learned. You don't have to burn bridges to disappear. You can just stop showing up and let the silence remind them you were the architect all along. It wasn't just a car. It was the last thing my mother touched with love. And now it was covered in jagged scratches that sliced through the paint like they were trying to erase her. My name is Clara. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever felt like someone spit on something you bled for? Like your grief, your love, your memory meant absolutely nothing? The damage stretched across the hood in angry arcs, raw and deliberate. My legs went numb. I couldn't breathe. The car, my mother's vintage 1969 Mustang, was more than just steel and wheels. It was the only thing she left me when cancer took her, a restoration project we never got to finish together. But I had finished it. I spent months saving every penny, sanding every corner, repainting it myself in the exact shade of sky blue she loved. I poured my heartbreak into every inch, like maybe if I got it right, I could bring a part of her back. And now it looked like someone had taken a key and carved cruelty into my mother's memory. Whoa. A voice rang out behind me, casual, careless. "Didn't mean for you to cry about it. It's just a car." I turned slowly. Dylan. My neighbor's teenage son. Barely 18, with that smug, dead-eyed stare only someone who's never known consequences could wear. He was holding a can of soda, his shirt half-tucked, like he'd just rolled out of bed to watch my pain from the comfort of his porch. "It looked old anyway," he added with a shrug, before slurping from the can. I stared at him. I couldn't even speak. I couldn't scream. If I did, I knew I'd cry and he'd win. So I didn't say a word. I just turned around, climbed into the driver's seat, and drove away with shaking hands and a roaring storm behind my ribcage. He thought I left because I was weak. He thought I'd just go inside, cry into a pillow, and come back tomorrow pretending nothing happened. He didn't know me at all. Because that night I didn't cry. I didn't sleep either. Instead, I sat in my living room with the lights off and stared at the photo on the wall. Me and Mom leaning against that same Mustang, both of us grinning like the world couldn't touch us. He touched it. He scratched the only thing I had left of her. And tomorrow he was going to understand exactly what that meant. Not through violence, not through screaming, but through something colder, something smarter, something permanent. I wasn't going to destroy him. I was going to teach him. And the first lesson? You don't spit on someone's pain and walk away whole. Dylan had always been that kid. You know the type, the one who breaks your window playing baseball and laughs when you ask him to pay for it. The one who speeds down the street at midnight blasting music, then smirks when you ask him to keep it down. He was chaos wrapped in entitlement, and everyone on our street knew it. But no one said anything, because his parents were the loudest, wealthiest voices in the neighborhood. His father, Greg, was the HOA president. His mother, Sandy, hosted the annual 4th of July barbecue, acting like she was royalty because she made potato salad with truffle oil. They wore their money like armor, and they used it to shield Dylan from every consequence life tried to hand him.
Me?
I was just the quiet girl across the street with paint-stained jeans and grease under her nails. After Mom died, I didn't have the energy to keep up appearances. The grief hit me like a slow, suffocating wave. My friends drifted away, unsure of what to say. I lost my job at the art studio when I took too many days off. People offered condolences and casseroles, then went back to their routines. But I stayed broken. And that Mustang was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. It had been her dream, something she and her father worked on when she was a teenager. After he passed, she parked it in our garage and left it untouched for years. When she got sick, we started working on it again together, on days when she felt strong enough to lift a wrench. She used to say, "We'll finish it together. And when it runs again, we'll drive until the sun disappears." She died before we could. So I picked up where she left off. Every day, after cleaning houses or delivering groceries to make ends meet, I'd spend my nights sanding, sealing, polishing. I learned everything I could about vintage cars. I took online classes. I bartered with mechanics, traded artwork for parts. I fought for that car like it was the only war I had left to win. And when I finally turned that engine over for the first time, it felt like she was sitting right next to me, smiling. That's what Dylan scratched. That's what he mocked. The first time Dylan made a cruel joke about my ancient junkyard project, I brushed it off. He had no idea what it meant. But as time passed and he saw the car come back to life, his jabs grew sharper. "Still pretending your mom's in that bucket of bolts," he said once, laughing with his idiot friends. I stayed quiet, because some battles aren't worth starting. But the moment I saw what he'd done to the paint, deep, messy swirls right over the passenger door, where my mother used to rest her hand, that silence cracked. And something cold and calculated grew in its place. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about teaching him what respect costs when you don't give it freely. And I already knew what he valued most. Because just like I spent every spare second with my Mustang, Dylan had his own obsession. That loud, chrome-drenched motorcycle he worshipped. The one he thought made him untouchable. I smiled that night. Not out of happiness, but purpose. He scratched my memory. I was about to mess with his reflection. The next morning, I walked outside and stared at the Mustang. The scratches were still there, mocking me in daylight. I ran my fingers gently over the grooves, feeling the damage all the way in my chest. But this time, I wasn't shaken. I was measuring. Across the street, Dylan's garage door was open. His precious motorcycle gleamed under the morning sun like it was on display at an auto show. Matte black, gold accents, custom exhaust. A Ducati, I'd learned. Gifted on his 18th birthday. His parents didn't care that he hadn't graduated, had no job, and had a rap sheet of noise complaints. As long as he stayed out of jail and looked cool doing it, they were proud. He cleaned that bike daily, waxed it with microfiber cloths, posted filtered pictures of it online like it was some kind of deity. He even parked it diagonally in the driveway, like he wanted the whole street to admire it. But I didn't care how shiny it was. I cared about what was underneath. And that's when I started watching. Over the next few days, I observed Dylan like a scientist studying a lab rat. I noticed the pattern. He always parked half a foot over the sidewalk, illegal, but unnoticed. He never locked the bike properly, just left it with the kickstand down, confident no one would dare touch it. And then I remembered something. A week earlier, while repainting the Mustang's side mirror, I'd glanced across the street and noticed an envelope tucked under Dylan's windshield. A parking violation. One he crumpled and threw into his trash without even reading. I dug deeper. A few minutes on the city's public violation database revealed more than I expected. 6 unpaid tickets, 1 expired registration, and 2 complaints filed against him for reckless driving. One of them detailed an incident where he nearly hit a child on a scooter. Suddenly, the situation expanded in my mind like a puzzle snapping into focus. This wasn't just a spoiled brat who keyed my car. This was a pattern. A trail of destruction left behind by a kid who thought consequences were myths made up for poor people. But the deeper I dug, the more I started seeing something I hadn't expected. He didn't just behave like someone who didn't care. He behaved like someone who couldn't afford to care. The flashy bike? Still under a payment plan. The insurance? Spotty. The house? Recently refinanced. Greg and Sandy weren't the high-rolling suburban royalty they pretended to be. Their empire was held together with credit cards, charm, and denial. And Dylan? He wasn't rich. He just grew up believing he was untouchable. I copied everything. Screenshots. VIN numbers. License plate records. I kept them in a secure folder on a drive labeled simply, Rebuild. Because that's what I was doing now. Not just fixing my car, but rebuilding the version of me that let people like Dylan laugh at my pain and walk away. I didn't want to damage his bike. I wanted him to feel what I felt. That hollow collapse in your chest when something you love is stripped from you, not out of rage, but out of utter, cold indifference. I was done crying. It was time he learned how it feels to be erased. And when he walked outside the next morning, the real lesson would begin. The day before I made my move, I drove the Mustang across town to my cousin Nate's auto shop. He was one of the few people who knew how much the car meant to me. When he saw the scratches, he didn't ask questions, just set down his coffee and walked straight to the damage. "Someone did this on purpose," he muttered, jaw tight. I nodded silently. "Can you fix it without touching the rest of the finish? I don't want the car to lose her character." He smiled gently, like he understood something deeper. "I got you." I left the Mustang in his care, took a rideshare home, and set the real plan in motion. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. Not violence. Not destruction. That would have made me like Dylan. No, I wanted consequence. Real consequence. The kind that sticks. That night, I stayed up crafting an airtight, legal revenge. I uploaded all the documentation I'd gathered. Dylan's unpaid tickets, expired registration, reckless driving reports, and photos of his illegal parking to a secure cloud folder. Then I submitted a full complaint to the city parking authority through their enforcement portal. But I didn't stop there. Using a vehicle's VIN, I cross-checked with the state's insurance verification system. His coverage had lapsed, which meant if he so much as touched that bike on public property, he was operating illegally. By morning, I'd sent the full dossier, complete with time-stamped photos and video, to 3 departments: parking enforcement, the DMV, and the local traffic division. I made sure every agency with authority over that bike had what they needed. But I saved one final detail for myself. You see, Dylan always parked on the edge of his driveway, just enough to hang over the sidewalk. That's not just inconsiderate, it's a safety hazard. One that qualified for immediate towing under city code, especially for unregistered vehicles. And lucky for me, a friend from a women's car restoration forum worked dispatch for a private towing service. I sent her everything. Not as a favor, just the facts. She replied, "Got it. We'll swing by early. If it's still there and matches what you said, it's gone." I barely slept that night. Not from nerves, but anticipation. I kept picturing that smug look Dylan gave me when he said, "It looked old anyway." He thought I was beneath him, that I'd do nothing. But what he didn't realize was, when you destroy something built from grief and love, you don't just face anger. You face precision. At 5:42 a.m., I sat on my front porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee. At 6:03, the tow truck pulled up.
Quiet.
Efficient. By 6:07, the bike was gone. They didn't ring the doorbell. They didn't make noise. They just hoisted it up like they were lifting a corpse. At 6:08, I walked back inside. And at exactly 7:14 a.m., I heard the sound of Dylan's garage opening, followed by the most satisfying silence I'd ever experienced. No shouting. No swearing. Just silence. That empty, panic silence when someone realizes the world doesn't bend for them anymore. He ran back inside. Moments later, I watched from the window as Greg came out in pajama pants, phone pressed to his ear, pacing furiously in the driveway. They were calling every number they could find. But they wouldn't find that bike anytime soon. Because that bike didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to the system. And the system doesn't play favorites. By noon, our quiet suburban street buzzed with something it hadn't felt in years. Discomfort. Delicious. Thick discomfort that clung to every fence post and mailbox. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering like pigeons around a dropped piece of bread. Greg's voice boomed across the driveway. No, listen, this is outrageous. That bike cost over 20 grand. There has to be some mistake. Dylan stood behind him, pacing like a trapped animal, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and confusion. His confidence was gone.
Just like the bike.
I sat on my porch, flipping through a book I wasn't reading, sipping sweet tea I didn't even want. I didn't look their way, didn't smile, didn't blink. I didn't need to. Because nothing says you lost like silence. Clara. Sandy finally called out, her voice tight and sugary. Did you see anything this morning? The bike. Someone must have stolen it. I looked up, slowly. Oh, I said, feigning innocence. You mean the motorcycle that was illegally parked with expired tags and no visible registration sticker? That one. Her face cracked slightly. Well, I don't know about the registration. I think the city's enforcing sidewalk codes more strictly lately, I added casually. But then again, people really should keep up with their documentation. Especially when they've had, 6 months of unpaid violations. Greg's jaw clenched. You knew this was going to happen. I tilted my head. I knew you were overdue for a reality check. Dylan finally snapped. You snitched on me over a car? It was a scratch. You're that pathetic. I stood. That one word, pathetic, was a match on dry wood. I stepped toward him slowly, one step at a time, eyes locked on his like he was a roach that had crawled across my kitchen counter. You didn't scratch a car, Dylan, I said, voice low but vibrating with fire. You vandalized the last piece of my mother I had left. You mocked her memory. You laughed at my grief. And now you're finally feeling something close to the weight I've carried since the day she died. His eyes darted to his parents, searching for backup. None came. Greg and Sandy stood frozen, silent for once. Sandy's arms were crossed. Greg looked like he might speak, then thought better of it. Dylan tried again. It's just a bike, okay? You didn't have to destroy me over it. No, I said. I didn't destroy you. I let your own actions do that. He was quiet. Consider this a small sample, I continued. Because the next time you try to stomp on someone's grief, you might not be lucky enough to learn your lesson with just a toe and a public record. I turned and walked away, heartbeat steady, the heavy finality of justice crackling behind me like thunder. By the end of the day, Dylan's bike had been towed to an impound 2 cities away. Between the fines, fees, overdue citations, and registration violations, they'd have to cough up over $4,000 to reclaim it, and that didn't include the late charges or insurance issues now tangled in red tape. His social media went dark. His bike god persona erased overnight. The same neighbors who used to laugh at his loud jokes now whispered behind his back, shaking their heads.
And me?
I drove my freshly restored Mustang down the street at sunset, windows rolled down, stereo playing softly, Same song Mom used to hum when we worked on the car together. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. I was free. It didn't take long for the cracks to spread. By the end of the week, Dylan's face looked more hollow than smug. The same guy who strutted around shirtless while revving his engine at 6 a.m. now walked with his head down, earbuds in, trying to blend into the background. But shame has a scent, and our street had a strong nose. The tow company refused to release the bike until all charges were cleared. When Greg tried to argue his way through it, the city slapped on a vehicle lien notice. The bike was no longer theirs. Not unless they wanted to cough up everything in full. Neighbors whispered. The woman 2 doors down who used to flirt with Greg at barbecues started waving at me instead. Mr. Taylor, who always tolerated Dylan's loud music with clenched teeth, now grinned every time I started the Mustang. Greg tried to save face by filing a complaint with the HOA, accusing me of creating a hostile environment. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. He didn't expect me to show up at the board meeting, dressed in a blazer, a stack of documentation under my arm. I'm happy to walk you through the city ordinances your son violated, I said calmly. Or maybe we should discuss how your unpaid fines technically violate HOA compliance rules? The silence that followed was everything I needed. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. Dylan, stripped of his social image, tried rebuilding his confidence online, posting old photos, recycled captions. But the comments were brutal. His friends had moved on. No one came to his defense. The joke was over.
And he was the punchline.
At home, things only worsened. I watched Sandy slam the door on Greg's face during one of their shouting matches. Word spread that they were struggling financially. The house, once the pride of the block with its perfectly trimmed hedges and luxury cars, started to look tired. The lights stayed off longer. Deliveries stopped. No more catered lunches. No more parties. And Dylan? He got a job. A real one. At the car wash off Route 7. I found out because I happened to stop there on a Saturday, mud clinging to my tires after a long drive. He didn't see me until I rolled down the window. Our eyes met. For a second, I thought he might pretend not to recognize me. But then he nodded. Just once. And walked around to scrub my windshield. There was no smugness. No smirk. Just quiet focus.
He didn't speak.
I tipped generously. Not because I wanted to humiliate him, but because I knew what it meant to start over. To rebuild. I wasn't looking to ruin him. I wanted to shake him awake. And I did. When I drove away, I saw him pause at the edge of the parking lot. Hands on his hips, face tilted up to the sky like he was trying to catch his breath. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. But I knew he felt it.
The shift.
The weight. The accountability. Everything he took from me, I took back. Not with violence. With truth. With justice. And with a kind of silence that speaks louder than rage ever could. After everything, peace didn't come all at once. It came in moments. Quiet ones. I'd wake up early and sit on the porch with my coffee, the Mustang gleaming in the driveway. I'd hear birds instead of revving engines. No more sharp whistles from Dylan. No more Sandy's forced good mornings.
Just calm. Space. Breath.
And for the first time in years, I filled that space with something real. Myself. I took a part-time job at a local restoration garage that specialized in vintage cars. The owner, Miss Dottie, was in her late 60s with a braid down to her waist and a voice like gravel and honey. When I told her about my Mustang and my mother, she gave me a long look and said, "We'll be good for each other." And we were. During the day, I got my hands dirty, pulling engines apart, repainting chipped doors, learning things I'd never had the confidence to ask before. At night, I worked on launching my own side project, a nonprofit initiative for women learning auto restoration. Not just for cars, but for healing. A place where grief and grease could mix, where people like me could find power in what they built with their hands. We called it Her Drive. Alex, a close friend from high school I'd reconnected with during the storm, helped me build the website. And Nate, my cousin, donated the first tool set. Within 3 months, we had 10 women in our program. All of them had stories,
Loss.
trauma, anger, and all of them left every Saturday class with grease under their nails and a little more strength in their eyes. One day, Miss Dottie pulled me aside. "You know," she said, wiping her hands on a rag, "some people live their whole lives never getting to turn pain into purpose. You didn't just fix a car, Clara. You turned your mother's memory into motion." That stayed with me. Even the Mustang began to feel different. Not just a monument to grief, but a companion on the road I was carving forward. I no longer drove it to remember her. I drove it because it made me feel alive. And as for Dylan, he kept his distance. Sometimes I saw him walking past the shop on his way to work, helmet in hand, head down. The new bike he rode wasn't nearly as flashy. He didn't rev it. He didn't pose for pictures. But he wore a mechanic's uniform now. He was earning his own way. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was growth. I didn't need to know.
What mattered was that I had changed.
I wasn't the girl who stood silently while someone laughed at her pain. I was the woman who turned that pain into power, into community, into something that lived beyond her own healing. And maybe, in some strange way, Dylan had given me the final push to become that version of myself. But he'd never take credit for it. This was mine. All of it. 6 months after the bike was towed, I received a letter. Handwritten. The envelope had my name carefully penned across the front. No return address. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, or maybe closure, pulled me in. Inside was a single page. Neat handwriting. No excuses. Just this. "Clara, I know saying sorry doesn't fix the damage I caused. And I won't pretend to understand what that car meant to you, but I see it now. I see the weight behind what I dismissed. You didn't just take my bike. You made me face myself. And you were right. No one's ever held me accountable before. But you did. And because of that, I'm trying. I'm taking classes at the community college. I'm working nights. I paid off the fees. The bike's gone, and that's fine. Honestly, it was never mine to begin with. Not really. It was just something I used to hide behind. Thank you for showing me I couldn't hide anymore. Dylan." I read it once, then again. And the third time I folded it slowly, set it inside the glove box of the Mustang, and closed it with care. Because that letter didn't undo what happened. But it did something better. It proved that silence can echo louder than rage. That dignity can disarm arrogance. And that sometimes the real revenge isn't breaking someone, but waking them up. That Sunday, I took the Mustang out to the edge of town, to the long winding road that hugs the coast. It was Mom's favorite stretch, where she used to say, "Let the sky remind you that grief doesn't last forever." I drove for miles with the windows down, wind in my hair, the sun slicing through the clouds just the way she liked it. At a quiet overlook, I parked and stepped out. The ocean roared below, like a living heart. I laid a single photo on the dashboard. Mom, in her denim overalls, arms crossed, standing next to the Mustang when it was just rust and bones. Then I whispered, "We finished it, Mom. She's ready." I smiled, not the smile of someone who won, but someone who healed. Behind me, the sound of an engine approached. A familiar one. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. Dylan pulled into the lot slowly, his bike quiet, his helmet removed with care. He parked on the opposite end, far from me, respectful. He didn't try to talk.
He didn't wave.
He just looked at the view, then at the car, then nodded once. Then he turned and left. That was all. No grand apologies. No theatrics. Just a small, quiet recognition. And that was enough. Because this story didn't need a loud ending. It began with pain, but it ends with growth. With clarity. With power returned to where it belonged.
To me.
They say revenge is best served cold. But I disagree. Revenge, real revenge, is served quietly, in the form of a life rebuilt, a legacy restored, and the peace that comes when you've risen beyond the reach of those who tried to break you. I didn't need to ruin his life. I just needed to reclaim mine. And I did. 1 mile at a time.